Hey fellow anglers, today we're going to talk about what I consider single-handedly the best dry dropper system there is. And this is something my brother and I came up with ourselves. We are the least creative people on the planet. We never come up with anything interesting. We just take all the great ideas of all the other fishermen and make them our own. But this is one that we did come up with. And the reason we did is because our job is to keep our clients' flies in the water as much as we can. It's all about statistics. The longer that flies at the water, the best drift, the better their chance of catching more fish. And you can't do that when you're untangling lines. I don't care, I don't get frustrated. People could be tangled all day long and it wouldn't bother me at all. However, they're not catching fish when the fly's in my hands untangling. So a lot of times across Montana where I guide, we use a lot of really big flies, big attractors. Something like this little noble, tro noble here. Big foam flies, a lot of legs, things like that. Well, you tie a little thin dropper nymph to the end of that, and it has a tendency to tangle up right around the front of the foam between the two chunks of foam. So we got really frustrated by being able to have a dropper that's light enough tippet to sink down deep with a light nymph, but stiff enough to turn away from this dry fly that's going to tangle us up. So we devised what we call the tapered dropper system, and it's pretty simple on how we go about it. We're going to put on our big dry fly, tied on, and we typically use a lot heavier tippet than most people. We use like 2x to something like this, so it turns it away from the fly line real quick. We might use 3x on something like this. We're going to lash that onto the dry fly, and then instead of just, and we typically do, let's say 3x to 4x or 2x to 4x. We want the dropper to be quite light so it sinks really fast. We might use a dropper that's 3 feet long. And in order to do that and not tangle, we're going to put a little stick of an additional same size tippet as what we tied on this bigger fly with. We're going to tie that right on the bend of the hook first and then do a triple surgeons onto our dropper tippet that's going to sink real fast. So if I tie this on 2x onto here, and I'm going to tie a piece about 3 or 4 inches of 2x or 3x right onto here, well, if I tied the whole nymph rig on that, that little tiny nymph would just float along right under the surface. But if I tie that on and then tie a little bit of 4 or even 5x, if I want it to sink really fast, it's going to come, the fly will be floating, this little stick will stick out here, and it's going to drop straight down. It's critical. Makes it sink really fast. Another great thing it is, you're going to snag that dropper, and you can't get it loose, you're yanking on it. It's typically going to break at the weakest point, which is right at that surgeon's knot right there. So instead of losing both flies, you're only going to lose one fly. You just have to add on that light tippet again. And I'll show you how to tie that here in just a second. All right, so I'm going to walk you through the steps to tie what we call the tapered dropper. All right, it's pretty simple. It's essentially one more knot than you normally use for a dropper system. First, we're going to lash on our attractor dry fly. And without my cheaters, who knows if I can do that, but we'll try it. So we're going to start right here. This happens to be a big noble, true noble, one of my favorites, by the way. It's a great fly. And we're going to spin this on, but this is all typical knots that you would use anywhere else. And you could do this any kind of clench knot that you prefer. We always do the improved clench. Pull it down tight, wet your knots like any good surgeon would, and snug it down snug. Now here's the tree part. So this is just standard. We've got pretty heavy, it's 2x because it's a big fly and we want it to turn over. It's got a little weight on the end and wind resistance. So that's what this is. Then I'm going to grab my tippet spool, and I have 2x on this. So on this little stiff dropper piece, 3x or heavier will be all right. So on this one, I'll put a little bit of 3x on there. I'm going to pull off about 7 or 8 inches of that, maybe 10. And once again, with your knot here, you can do it anywhere you want. Some people like to take it around their finger like that. I prefer to just hook it on, just as you're going to do any dropper. We're going to hook it right around the bend of the hook, and then we're just going to tie an improved clench right on the bend of the hook. Do about 7 wraps, whatever it is. Going to get those, run it through the hole at the bottom, back through that centerpiece. Lick your knot so it doesn't burn. We're going to pull that down. It's pretty tight. We're going to pull it down all the way tight to that thing. That's critical. We want that one really snug. Make sure you snug up both sides. I always pinch my barbs. I haven't pinched that one yet, which makes me really nervous because if I run that through my thumb, I'm going to wish I did. But I always pinch my barbs, and just that little hump will keep it from slipping off. Barbless hooks are really cool, but they are tough for droppers because the dropper will fall off. But if you pinch your barb flat, that little hump will keep it on there. So now we've got this little stick of 3x on here, and I'm going to snip that short. And you can see that this material is reasonably stiff, right? Kind of has some rigidity here. Here's your 2. You can put a little piece of 2 here, or you can do this 3 to give it a little more life, but it's going to be stiff. What we want to do is avoid this piece of this dropper to swinging around and snagging around the back of the fly. That's what keeps us out of fishing. Our goal is to keep this dropper flipped away from the fly and then sinking down. So now we have it about, what is that? I don't know. We'll probably put 4 inches, 5 inches on there. Then I'm going to take pretty typical Western Montana rig. We're going to use 4X for our dropper. You can use 5, it'll sink faster, but you lose more fish, break more flies off. And typically the fish around here aren't that tricky. You can get away with 4X. So I'm going to pull off, and we use pretty long droppers here. We might use one over 30 inches deep. I'm going to snip that off. Now we have our dry, our little stick of heavy tippet, and I'm going to lay them side by side, and I'm going to do a little triple surgeons right here. Pretty simple stuff. If you don't know how to do these knots, look on the web, there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through how to tie the knots because there's a million people that show it how to do it pretty easy. I like the triple surgeons because it seems to hold better with no snags, it doesn't break as easy either. Now, that's how long my dropper is going to be. I've got my dry, my stiff piece here that's going to give it a little more rigidity, and it's going to go all the way down to the dropper. And we'll put a little nymph on here. So then we're just going to put it on just like you would normally. Same thing, improved clinch. So now we have big dry fly, little stiff, and you can push that right up under the foam too. It'll make it stick out there a little stiffer like this. And then you have that little knot down to your dropper, and that's how you're going to fish this really light. I could put a really small dropper on here on lighter tippet and it still sink really fast. That's the tapered dropper system.